As Vesalius found out, professors in medical schools seldom performed surgery. They didn't think it proper for a professional man to do such work. The word surgeon is from a French word meaning one who works with his hands. This narrow-minded rejection of honest labor grew from the daily life of ancient Greece. The only people with leisure time to free their minds to think upon scientific problems, were members of the upper class. Their slaves did all the manual labor. Those of noble birth considered it disgraceful to dirty their hands in scientific experiments. They believed, incorrectly, that they could solve problems simply by thinking about them. In Europe of the 1500s, barbers, not doctors, performed operations, pulled teeth, and treated cuts. Barbers who gained skill in closing wounds were called barber surgeons. The stripes of a barber pole still show red for blood and white for bandages. The greatest of these barber surgeons was Ambroise Pare. Pare was born into a country town in France in 1510. Born into a poor family, he received only a merchant's education. It did not include Latin and Greek, the languages used by scholars and doctors. His parents did teach Pare about the love of God. Throughout his life he retained that simple humility that is so characteristic of all Christians. He grew up to be a barber's assistant. It was the first step to becoming a full-fledged doctor. As time passed, Pare grew more and more interested in the medical side of his barber profession. In 1529, at the age of 19, he took a big step. He decided to become a real doctor. "The best medical schools are in Paris," he told his parents. "I'll study there." The medical schools in Paris turned him away. He had the ability, but professors gave entrance tests in Latin and Greek, languages he could neither read nor write. At the time, he was intensely disappointed. He had come to Paris to study medicine, and his strong spirit refused to be broken by the rejections. He found a position as barber surgeon at the Hotel of God. It was a charity hospital, the oldest hospital in the world, and very primitive. The hospital building was dirty, poorly lighted, and damp. Charcoal fires burned in copper pans on the floor to heat it during winter. Every so often, a professor would bring his medical students around to the wards and lecture to them about the cases there. The students wrinkled their noses at the foul smells of the sick. They fled from the place as soon as the lectures ended. It was much more pleasant to treat wealthy patients in their own homes. Pare gained a tremendous amount of practical experience. He discovered that many of the facts that professors taught their students were wrong. Everything Pare learned came to him firsthand. 3 years later, when France went to war, Pare was hired to be a surgeon. Doctors of Pare's day taught that the powder burns from gunshots were poisonous. "Such wounds will prove fatal unless treated at once," they declared. The treatment was a brutal one. They poured boiling oil into the wound to drive out the poison. This terrible remedy was horribly painful. Pare followed the standard medical remedy until a fearful battle broke out. Many men fell from gunshot wounds. Pare ran out of oil. He had to treat the wounds somehow. So in desperation he made an ointment of egg yolk, oil of roses, and turpentine. Then he dressed the wounds in the soothing ointment. Throughout the night he worried about the men. He blamed himself for running out of oil. He expected the patients not treated with boiling oil to die of the powder burn poison. He hardly slept that night. The next morning he made the rounds. To his great relief, he discovered that the men who had received soothing ointment had rested far more comfortably than those treated with boiling oil. They were alive, doing well, and feeling little pain. "The others," he reported, Those treated with boiling oil ran a high fever. Their wounds were inflamed, swollen, and acutely painful. It wasn't acceptable medical practice, but never again, Pare said. I've resolved never so cruelly to burn poor wounded men. This set him thinking about other ways to relieve pain. Hippocrates, the Greek physician, had taught that doctors should avoid harsh remedies. It was better to do nothing than to take drastic action. Many surgeons failed to remember that they were working on human beings. They cut away without regard for the pain they caused. Pare felt otherwise. The foundation of medicine must be love, Pare said. Pare's most horrible duty involved amputations of arms or legs. After an amputation, doctors seared the stump with a white-hot iron. Otherwise, the unfortunate victim would bleed to death. Often soldiers endured the amputation only to die from shock when Pare applied the hot iron. Wasn't there a less painful way to stop the bleeding? Pare thought of a simple, almost painless solution. He put a spool of silk thread in his medical kit. The test came late one night when a stray bullet shattered a soldier's leg. Pare had no choice but to amputate the leg. It was broken beyond repair. Unless he took immediate action, infection would set in, the limb would fester, and end in certain death. This was before painkillers. An amputation had to be done quickly. A surgeon's skill was judged by his speed. Pare made his incision and sawed through the bone in only 3 minutes. The soldier endured the amputation while fully awake, and bravely withstood Pare sawing through the bone. At the end of the operation, Pare's assistant handed him the hot iron. "Not this time," Pare said, and passed it back. Instead, he removed from his medical bag the silk thread. Working rapidly, Pare tied off the blood vessels. Bleeding stopped. As simple as that. The patient lived. When other soldiers heard of the successful operation, they made Pare their hero. They loved the young surgeon who spared them from so much pain. Soldiers were very poorly paid, but they filled a helmet with silver and gold coins to reward him. Pare willingly tried new ways of healing. His methods saved thousands of soldiers who would have been left for dead on the battlefield. Pare refused to give up hope for an injured man. In Paris, however, doctors resented his success. A piece of thread did the work of a white-hot iron. He closed cuts with needle and thread, like a common housewife mending a rip in cloth. One doctor warned, "To tie the vessels after amputation is a new remedy, therefore it should not be used." Pare decided to write about his medical discoveries. Although he had learned Latin, he chose to write in French, so common barber surgeons could read his book. The book was delightful. Rather than quoting ancient authorities, Pare packed his book with practical surgical advice. He never tried to use big words to sound more profound. As important as Pare's manuscript was, he couldn't get it published. Doctors in the medical schools resented his fame. They were the experts, they believed. Pare was only a backward barber. An old law was found and used against Pare. No medical book could be published unless a committee of doctors from the medical school of Paris approved it. 4 years passed before Pare got the necessary approval. Finally, his book was published. It sold out immediately. Barbers and doctors, too, clamored for copies. The publisher reprinted it 4 times within a few years. It was translated into Latin and several other languages, including English. Some people expressed surprise that he shared his medical knowledge so freely. His fame and livelihood came from the medical facts that he put to work each day. Pare answered, The light of a candle will not diminish, no matter how many may come to light their torches by it. Pare met Vesalius in Paris and learned of his study of the human body. Pare translated summaries of Vesalius's book into French. Other barber surgeons would have a guide to the human body too. Pare did not have a formal education. He never earned a medical degree. Yet he became France's most skilled surgeon. In 1562 he was given the dignified title First Surgeon of the King. Pare died in 1590. He had practiced medicine to the last. This humble barber surgeon had replaced worthless speculation in surgery with practical experience. His discovery that blood vessels could be tied off to prevent bleeding marked the start of modern surgery. Today, the humble barber surgeon is ranked as the founder of modern surgery. The people of France raised a statue in his honor. Inscribed on it are the simple words, "I treated him, God healed him."